The Automotive Business Council released September's car sales figures this week and noted a decline in annual new vehicle sales. 44,081 new vehicles were sold in the month, down 4.1% on September 2023, while export sales came in at 21,964 units, down from 35,499 vehicles exported in September last year. The Automotive Business Council says the first half of the year was a tough period given the macroeconomic backdrop, but that with interest rates looking to come down on a cumulative basis, it's hopeful that the fortunes of the local car manufacturers will improve. Well, to discuss the dynamics influencing and affecting the sector, I'm joined by Billy Tom. He's the president of NAAMSA and also the president of Isuzu Motors South Africa. Thank you very much, sir, for joining us.
Good afternoon, Nompu, and to the viewers as well.
Super. So let's begin by sort of giving us your characterization of how the year has gone thus far. Has it been a tale of two fortunes? What was the first half of the year like in terms of vehicle sales?
I think the year lived up to what we predicted. We forecasted the first half of the year to be very tough because it was almost like a follow-through of what we experienced last year, the delays at the ports, the consumers that is highly indebted. I mean, we've had interest rates at a very high level, the fuel price increases. And what we're seeing on the second half of the year, things are starting to ease off. Inflation is very low. It's at a point where the Reserve Bank wants it to be sitting around 4.5%. We've seen a continuing of the reduction of fuel prices, as well as last month. I mean, we expected the rate reduction, and all those things are starting to come through. And one important area as well, especially for the industry, we've had 2 quarters of no load shedding, and it's a relief to us, it's a relief to the consumer, and we are forecasting an improvement towards year end. And I mean, with another rate cut coming, it's debatable whether it's 25 basis points or 50 basis points. And I think the consumer is starting to be in a better place. I mean, yesterday or the day before, we had petrol decrease as well. So those are good signs.
Yes.
And we're very comfortable that we will see a better end to this year.
Yeah, no, it's been very positive on the fuel front. I think we've had 5 consecutive months of decreases. But now I wanted to ask you about the exports. You indicate that on a year-on-year basis, up until the end of September 2024, there was a decline in export units of 289,000. What does this say about our export destination markets? What's happening there? Are they going off our exports? What is it all about?
So the precise reduction in our exports is about 20% year to date. Last month, that number looked very big at minus 38%. There is 2 things. The first thing is some of the models are coming to the end of their life cycle and new models will be launched. So there tends to be almost like a slowdown when you do the model change. So some of the manufacturers are going through that change. And secondly, if you look at the numbers in the European Union, their numbers are growing negatively at double digit. So we export probably 85% of our export volumes to the European Union. So you can see the knock-on effects in South Africa. But I foresee that number to recover as well. And also, I mean, some of the things that are happening locally, the work around the ports, because we had delays in the ports, as well as some of the load shedding challenges we've had. Probably as the year ends, I foresee that number as some of the manufacturers start ramping up, improving drastically.
Yeah. So in terms of new passenger vehicle sales, those ticked up by 2%, which is positive, not shooting the lights out, but positive. But most of that demand coming from the rental car sector. Just tell us more about that.
So if you look at the car rental sector, they contribute about 15% of the passenger segment. But last month it was 28%. And if you look deeper, probably there's 2 reasons why that number is improved. Firstly, some of the corporate rentals, it's either they're expanding or replacing what they have. And then secondly, the rental companies are preparing for the festive season. So if you look at tourism is starting to get back to pre-COVID numbers, and they are almost like taking vehicles and stock for the rental market. So it's a good sign, but also if the passenger segment is starting signs of recovery, you can see what it means for the segment as a whole.
And you touched on it earlier, our macroeconomic backdrop of lower inflation and now the beginning of interest rate cuts. If we get a substantial amount of interest rate cuts, do you think that's going to then encourage people to want to buy new vehicles?
Nompu, my prediction is that the first quarter of next year is going to see a massive growth because it takes about 3 to 6 months for the consumers to feel the impact of rate reduction. I mean, we've seen the 25 basis points. If we get it 25 or 50, that's 50 to 75. And then when you start adding up, and then you add the fuel reduction, then those numbers start making sense. And we have a good festive season, and I foresee a good first quarter of next year.
So we've talked about the economic dynamics, but what about the change in the market, the South African market? We're seeing increasingly foreign vehicles, coming and taking a space in the market, people driving many different types of cars that are not made here in South Africa. How concerned are the original equipment manufacturers about that, given that obviously it means that it takes away jobs, and it means that, of course, you do export a lot of the stuff that you manufacture overseas, but you also have a market here. How concerned are you about foreign players?
So I think one needs to put context into the numbers. I mean, if you look at the growth in the industry, we're growing at negative 6%. The imported vehicles are growing negatively at 3%. But also, if you look at the vehicles that are being imported, the bulk of them are the entry-level vehicles, which talks to the consumer affordability, because the consumer is unable to afford high-ticket items, and they are buying lower. But I think in the long run, we almost need to revisit legislation and say, what is it that we do? And as you rightfully say, that number is growing, and one is also has to be very careful so that you don't run into a phase where you deindustrialize the industry, because now you start importing more than you exporting. So it is something that we keep looking at and probably raise it with government at the right time.
Tricky one. So the last thing that I wanted to ask you is really about electric vehicles. We keep on talking about electric vehicles. How is the regulatory framework looking for OEMs to be manufacturing EVs, and what's your expectation? Are these EVs that you produce here going to be for export markets, or do you see that the South African market would have an appetite for it, especially given our energy issues? Of course, they are being resolved over time. What are your thoughts?
The contribution, I mean, we've seen a huge growth on the EVs, but it's from a very small base. I mean, it's growing at double digits, and the volume contribution of EVs is about 1.5%, so it's still very small. But also, if you look at the makeup, it's a lot hybrids. I think 85% of the EVs, it's hybrids. So I think we're going to see almost movement, probably hybrids. I foresee them as a next step. Then people are going to go into full EVs. I mean, government has released the white paper, but we're still engaging governments because we were not happy with the contents of that white paper. So we're still talking to DTIC. And I think there's still a big opportunity for EVs in the country, but like you rightfully say, the infrastructure is very important because some of the experiences people have had in countries that have moved into EVs, you find that consumers that have bought EVs don't want to buy a second EV because of the experience they had. And I think in South Africa, I mean, like you're saying, we've had electricity issues, and also, I mean, range anxiety is a big issue. You don't want to drive a car and not have a charging point. But I think it's going to be a phased approach. I mean, if you look at the company I work for at Isuzu, we're not going directly into batteries, but we're going into gas, compressed natural gas, because some customers are using it within their businesses, so they're migrating to that. So there's going to be a number of steps. I don't think we're going to move immediately from ICE engines into BEVs. You're going to find hybrids are going to be much bigger, and that's why we engage in government so that they can include hybrids within that paper.
It's going to be an interesting space to watch. Keep talking to us, keep educating us so that we're on top of things as well. Thank you so much, Mr. Billy Tom. He's the president of NAAMSA and Isuzu Motors South Africa.